Good morning, everybody. My name's Richard Betts. We've got a super panel today. This is one of a series of events that we're running. And today we're looking at a really interesting topic, which is innovation districts, winning cities and investment. Just briefly, for those who don't know, Real Asset Media and Real Asset Investment Briefings, we run around 60 of these events a year. And previously, they were all focused on going there in person and meeting people. But since the health crisis, what we've done is moved everything online, so that includes both the events as well as TV interviews. And all of these are around aiming to continue sharing content, continue to allow the community to talk to one another and share insight. And so particularly we've been involved in special reports, doing more in-depth analysis. We have a weekly Realcast, which looks at the sort of key headlines of the week, and we'll start inviting guests to that to discuss some of the key themes. So if you would like to be a guest, do please let us know. And all of these events are designed to be interactive and live. So there's Q&A, so please do ask questions. Super panel here. What I'm going to do is just allow everybody to introduce yourselves. So let's start with you, Anne. So Anne Allen, just briefly, for those who don't know you, just briefly introduce yourself.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Anne Allen. I'm currently the Executive Director of Estates and Commercial Services at University of Glasgow. Some of you will know that I stepped down from that role this week, actually. And will be replaced by a gentleman called Ian Campbell. I'm sure that's the first bit of information most of you will want to know. I am, however, staying working as a consultant to the university to support them as they develop their thinking and work around the innovation districts. Thank you.
Super, thanks very much. Anna Stamp.
So my name is Anna Stamp, and I am the Interim Programme Director for Edinburgh BioQuarter. I have previously been with the University of Edinburgh Estates team for the past 15 years, and currently have the very privileged position of growing the Edinburgh BioQuarter into Edinburgh's Health Innovation District. So looking forward to this morning's debate.
Great, thanks very much. Eri.
Hello, good morning, Richard. Thanks for the invitation. I'm doing European research for Savills for the last 20 years. So my daily routine is about researching all the European markets across asset classes and advising our clients.
Great, super. Alasdair.
Good morning, everybody. Alasdair Morrison. I'm currently Head of Regeneration at Renfrewshire Council. I've spent 25 years working in property, England, Scotland, public sector, private sector, and I'm currently overseeing the economic strategy for Renfrewshire, which, for those who don't know, is the local authority immediately west of Glasgow City. Renfrewshire, in two numbers, is 180,000 population, 5,000 companies, and round about 25% of our GVA is in the manufacturing sector.
Great, thanks very much. Anne-Marie.
Hi, Richard. I'm Anne-Marie Campbell. I am the Project Director for Glasgow City Innovation District, which is a partnership between Glasgow City Council, Scottish Enterprise, the University, the Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurial Scotland. Prior to that, I was the Head of Operations for the Technology and Innovation Centre for the University of Strathclyde.
Great, thanks very much. Graham, just a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Graham Hill. I'm the Scottish Cities Executive with ARCADIS, who are a leading international design and consultancy company for natural and built assets. I also sit on the board of Architecture and Design Scotland and chair the Edinburgh Development Forum.
Graham, if you just share some of your kind of insights, that would be great.
Richard, thank you very much for that intro. That's done that for me. You've set the scene. So yeah, I'll dive straight in. So livable places have a huge impact on quality of life. So we really wanted to examine what successful placemaking looks like. So we did extensive consultation. We ran a number of breakfast roundtable discussions with leading people involved, passionate about placemaking, whether that be regional political leaders, public servants, business organisations, voluntary bodies, public agencies, civic institutions. So we really wanted to get a good cross-section of people invested in, passionate about the built environment and the places in which they lived, that they worked and that they played. So we explored the key tenets and the drivers of place, the challenges and opportunities, and what constitutes success. And that research informed the report Livable Places, and that identifies the five fundamentals of place, which all need to be considered to enable effective placemaking. But why place? So we feel now more than ever we need a new way of thinking, designing and creating place. So we know by 2050 an additional 2.5 billion people, that's 2/3 of the world's population, are expected to live in urban areas. We need 300,000 more homes a year just in the UK, but we know last year we probably only achieved less than 2/3 of that, and the impact of COVID-19 is going to be a big decline on that number. We know that for sure. And then Housing Charity Shelter estimated last year that there were 320,000 people in the UK without a home. And COVID-19 and climate change are causing people to think differently about the places that they work, that they live and they play. So the drivers for placemaking, what's making this happen? Well, you've got a combination. You have the national ambitions, that's policy set by UK and Scottish government and the funding that comes with that, the mandates around infrastructure and new build homes. You've got regional ambitions, so that's the city regions and the growth of the city region deal and devolved powers to local regional authorities. You have spatial, transport and economic plans, so national, regional and local strategy offering mechanism to bring forward development. The local ambitions from local authorities returning to house building themselves. The carbon and environmental goals, so we have national targets now, more important than ever, around achieving net zero by 2050, but more ambitious targets in Scottish regions, 2030 in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And then private sector innovation. So we're seeing innovation in new ways of delivering infrastructure, new ways of delivering homes, such as modular building, digital engagement tools, and of course new funding and financial models. But the impact of COVID-19 has made these drivers more pressing than ever, including the need for more flexible modular development and the need for development to form part of a green recovery and a renewed focus on health and well-being in place, including access to public community space. So these 5 fundamentals of place then, each is very important, but actually to have a successful place, we find that really you need all of them to be working together. They are community, funding and delivery, design and public realm, collaboration and sustainability. And I'll just take a few minutes to go through 5 panels, just bringing each of those to life. So community, the first fundamental, absolutely critical area of placemaking. So community should absolutely be at the heart and the heart of placemaking at the outset. And the sense that placemaking has got to be done with, not to communities. So we recommend that we put people first, really giving them an ongoing role in shaping the place, and all parts of the community need to be engaged in different ways, especially during times of crisis when traditional methods are unavailable. And then we need to champion community consent commitments. So there's a variety of methods, but the aim essentially is to have resident bodies as full-time partners for the long term. Second, funding and delivery. So we know that funding is likely to be scarce in coming years, more than ever. So development needs to be supported by an evidence base, a long-term plan and capacity to deliver. I think something like 1.8 billion of borrowing in this quarter is a record level, and that's bound to impact the availability of public sector funding for capital stimulus. And there's probably an expectation that we'll see more private sector investment coming through. So absolutely essential that we think about the long-term resourcing, that we get the sufficient ongoing resourcing, aligning funding and programs for long-term outcomes. The expertise and capacity is created. That strategies that align long-term plans, connectivity, and developing and investing in the capabilities to achieve that. And also we need to consider what changes should be brought forward and sped up around the planning system and to funding and tax arrangements to help maximise benefits, share value, and stimulate investment. Fundamental 3, design and public realm. So successful developments have a strong commitment to design and public realm, and both of which are fundamental to improvement of place. We've all seen poor examples from the past of estates which are anonymous or badly connected to job opportunities, to amenity, to transport. And really we've got an opportunity with innovation districts and to have winning cities that really thinks forward about the overall net gain and how places can be produced with the people in mind, the people who are going to be using them. So we should be responding to those needs. We should be creating well-connected, safe, mixed-use environments, strong transport links, co-producing purposeful place. So funding good design, making time and space for that good design, thinking carefully about public realm, that need for public space. Green and blue infrastructure is going to be so important. And a sense of uniting people and purpose through stewardship and the appointment of design champions with environmental and public health responsibility at the core. Fundamental 4, collaboration then. So this is effectively recognising that good placemaking doesn't happen in a vacuum. really we need to work hard, and it doesn't happen by accident. So you need to actually think about how you're going to make collaboration happen. And I think, going back to my earlier point about funding and delivery and the expected increase involvement in private sector investment, mechanisms that create and I suppose contribute to the placemaking efforts are actually thought through, and mechanisms are put in place that not only help the public and private sectors to work well together, help the community unlock expertise, funding shared goals, but that governance will underpin the collaboration and embed the role of community voice and cement the democratic input. I think in terms of risk, that needs to be thought about at the front end. Think about the political alignment, think about how you can bring that increased devolved power into the body. So thinking ahead, not just for now, but for the short and medium term. And sustainability, fundamental 5. So this is recognizing the imperative of the climate emergency, that sustainability is not optional, but fundamental. It reshapes the nature of placemaking and its delivery. So delivering net zero, I think it's essential that if we are going to tackle climate change meaningfully, that the development and the places we're creating actually are part of the solution. So they are meeting net zero carbon targets, and they're built to last. So placemaking should be resilient and sustainable in every sense. And that's thinking about not just the initial provision, but how that place will be stewarded, how it will be adaptive, how it will respond to community needs and help with community wealth building. Just a couple of case studies then, just to bring this to life. First, from Manchester. So like many parts of the UK, Manchester, the housing demand is far outstripping supply, the prices were soaring, and the commitment from the Greater Manchester Combined Authority was to create 10,000 new homes every year for the next 20 years. But the reality of that and finding the right sites, it was complex, it's time consuming, it involves multiple teams, different data sets and approvals. So our solution to that, working with Greater Manchester Combined Authority, was to create a digital platform to support the urban planning by connecting planners, landowners, developers and investors. And the end result is a land use evaluation model that underpins all planning activity, an analytics element focusing on investment options, and importantly, an element that monetizes the social value. And that collaborative digital environment rapidly helps assess multiple development opportunities, and it creates value for the investor, it speeds up the planning process, and it lowers costs. Second example from Perry Bar in Birmingham, and this was an area badly in need of regeneration. I think the Commonwealth Games has been great for it, so that's helped create a stimulus and a catalyst for investment. So by engaging with the local community at all ages and stages, so this example here is just engaging with the local school and not just sharing ideas about potential new job opportunities and different ideas around getting involved in master planning or engineering or architecture and design, actually ask the pupils to get involved in what the future place should look like and getting them to contribute actively to the perspective on the plans for their local area. So just an example of how you might make real some of that community engagement and bring all parts of the community involved. So if we get these 5 fundamentals right, and all of them are featuring, then you should expect to achieve these benefits. So places can be delivered more quickly and reliably, lower cost with higher return and greater satisfaction. Improving connectivity and social equality means the public sector will benefit, demand for services will fall. Obviously, a boost to employment and overall GVA, more predictable demand for energy and infrastructure providers, which is so key in order to bring the right energy at the right time. Investors and funders will see reduced risk and a higher quality of return, and so will help improve the cycle of investment. There will be improved use of data and analytics to effectively improve quality of outcomes. And finally, safer, more resilient communities, and people having that personal opportunity to employment, improving their life chances and better connectivity, better social infrastructure, and better outcomes around health, education, and amenities. So that's a very brief canter through the report around livable places. Hopefully it's helpful. And Richard, I'll pass back to you now and the panel. Thank you.
Eri, maybe starting with you, let's pick up with that, I suppose, more European context. How are you seeing the interest in both life sciences, innovation districts as part of that winning cities sense? And do you see that changing, Eri?
We do have examples, in Barcelona, in Stockholm, in Berlin, in Paris. We do have some examples, and there are also various types, if you like, of how these can be expressed. So they can be innovation districts which are within cities, or they can be initiatives led by universities, and then you have the like maybe science parks. That was a bit kind of the older type of hubs that we had in the past, innovation hubs. But now this is evolving and becoming more part of the cities. The life sciences is really big. There is a rising investment into by venture capital into this segment into Europe. We had almost 4 billion last year in Europe invested, and that was over 20% higher than the year before. So there is a lot of investment into research and development in biotech. So it is a sector that is going to continue to grow in the future, and it is led both by universities but also private sector. Again, if you want another figure, European companies invest like 40 billion last year into R&D for biotech. So all this also creates a lot of opportunities in the built environment.
Oh, that's great. And just picking up with you, in terms of, I suppose the crisis is in a way created different challenges, and you've got an interesting role because you're also looking at design and architecture as well. What's your sense, I suppose, picking up some of the points around innovation districts in general, but also looking specifically at the influence, I suppose, on winning cities, how those two are connected, and whether whether you think there'll be a change or has been a change in terms of the health crisis.
None of us quite know how this will play out, but if you look at those really successful innovation districts, both in Europe and across in the United States, we all talk about creating really vibrant communities. And Graham's one slide looked at collaboration. Innovation districts are based on the idea that you bring industry, great imaginative minds together, and out of that, some amazing things happen. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that at the moment with the way some of the health sector is working to create vaccines, etc. But how do you create that vibrant, collaborative environment, all based around things like co-worker space, when we suddenly have to think about social distancing, when people are going to be walking around the streets in masks, so not smiling, not integrating in the same way? And I think there's a real challenge and opportunity for the sector to start to think about how you make placemaking work differently, so that it can still contribute, it can still make a big difference, but it can do it in a way where people feel safe using it. Nobody has the answer to that, but I think that for me is one of the big debates that we need to take forward. Maybe it's something that comes out of these discussions today, but we have to look at how we make place work differently so people feel safe in it.
Well, that's interesting. And Anna, just coming to you, because you've got Edinburgh BioQuarter there, obviously, around health, life sciences. Are you expecting to see, or are you already seeing, I suppose, a larger interest in these kinds of innovation districts, especially those around the life science? And just pick up that point, if you can, on community and place, in terms of positioning that within part of a winning city, I suppose, and picking up Graham's point that it can't just be kind of dropped from nowhere into somewhere, that there's got to be a community around it.
Historically, collaboration has been seen within buildings, and I think the historical science parks, of which BioQuarter is one, it's very much a siloed approach. There's a wealth of great talent at these sites, but they're all within each of their own buildings. And I think the challenge is how do you connect these buildings? How do you glue them together? And how do you stop people just coming to work, staying in their building, and then going home at night and not actually collaborating across the site? I think the coming together of science as the sort of rapid response teams for COVID-19 has actually broken down a lot of the barriers, because at BioQuarter we're seeing scientists coming together from the NHS, from the university, from industry, to try and fight and come up with the necessary vaccines and treatments. So actually what it's doing is it's showing the importance of that collaboration between the various groups on a site. And as those of us that are responsible for the built environment, how do we actually encourage that? A lot of these sites, for example, they're not connected, cars can dominate them, they're not safe to walk around, they're not pleasant to walk around, and quite often you have to walk through car parks, or you have to walk through past compactors and back doors to buildings, as a lot of these sites have emerged organically over the past 20 years. So how do we take that and move them and create an actual district of a city, often not in a city centre, so you're not able to rely already on existing infrastructure like coffee shops and retail, and you have to create that from scratch. So there's a huge challenge to these sites in major investment, and a lot of that has to happen up front, and the reliance on public sector finance is obviously going to be under pressure. And really, is it the place of the public sector to actually create the ancillary spaces? And is that more of a partnership with the public sector moving forward, with the private sector, private-public relationship, to create that balance? So there's huge challenges of how do you bring a site together, create collaboration, and ultimately make a place that will work holistically, but also within a local context.
I mean, that's interesting, and there's a whole discussion to be had around there, and I'm going to pick up that point about financing and the respective place of both private investment within that and also government and cities. I'm just going to do a quick poll. Question is, do you think that the current health crisis will create a larger focus on life sciences and innovation districts more widely? So I'll leave that there for you to vote for 5 minutes, and then a couple of minutes, and then I'll share that. But Alasdair, I just wanted to come to you. So looking at, obviously from a sort of regional government perspective, just picking up the point there from Anna, how do you see local government and how do you see that in terms of the balance between local government, private investment, for example, picking up Anna's point?
I think that from my point of view, in terms of the development that we're trying to create at AMIDS, which is our Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District Scotland, which is immediately adjacent to Glasgow Airport and just to the west of Glasgow City. I mean, what we're trying to achieve there is something that involves a lot of the fundamentals, a lot of the elements that Graham alluded to in his presentation. I mean, we're not thinking it's going to be easy. We're not thinking we're going to get an awful lot of these things right. But we do believe that government, both city region government and governance and local government, has a key role to play in being able to facilitate and being able to bring about that level of control and change in the built environment for areas like this. I mean, I could go through in detail, Richard, if you want, in terms of some of the aspects we've looked at, if that would help. In the specifics of AMIDS. Do you think that would help in this instance?
I think it may be. I think what might be interesting, Alasdair, is just for those who don't know AMIDS, just because you're less on the life science and more on the advanced manufacturing side, just give us some insights about, I suppose, how you've looked at place and also how you're looking at funding specifically.
Okay. Well, in terms of place, I mean, we have right from the outset, we wanted to ensure that elements like sustainability and climate impact of the district that we were creating, and we are creating this district effectively from scratch. It's 100+ acres of green fields, but we wanted to minimise that impact. So we set out right at the outset to plan for how we could create active travel routes. It could be available to and from and within the district to allow for choice for the occupiers that are going to be there, trying to create this kind of urban feel, but within a kind of consolidated space with room for expansion and build on. But there was also to link the district to residential communities, but also to other business areas as well, and allow that evolution of active travel as it comes about. You know, the point that was picked up by Anna there about the dominance of the car. We've tried to look at that in terms of our master planning for the site to try and make sure that won't actually be the case. We're not saying it'll be easy, but we are trying to make sure that won't actually be the case. We've also looked at low carbon energy sources to power the development. We've got a district heating network that's been worked through at the moment in terms of working through a proposal moving towards procurement for that, with the first occupiers as early adopters. And then in the broadest sense of the word, we also wanted to create something at AMIDS that would have the qualities, Richard, to endure for a long period and wouldn't just get built and exist like so many of the business parks in the past. We've tried to create this sense of place, within it. We've worked with architects, 5+ architects from Manchester, and we worked with them right from the outset to try and get some of these collaborative elements that Anna referred to, in terms of a central place, a central square where people could actually meet and spend some part of their day without them having to be in their silos that she referred to. So have central collaboration spaces that could work, and we've seen a lot of research has been done in innovations districts, which says both US and European, that seems to say that works well, and also that you only really get one chance to get these parameters right. So it's very, very important when you're thinking about the built environment on this scale and planning it, that you actually make sure that you get these fundamentals built in right from the outset. You mentioned funding, Richard. We were very, very fortunate in that we were able to benefit from the City Deal, the Glasgow City Region City Deal funding, of which is around about circa 40 million, which is paid for all the upfront infrastructure to facilitate the site, the roads, the bridges, the services, the energy element that's going in. So that's played a big part in us being able to almost start with a blank palette and build from there, along with the the input from academia and industry.
No, that's great. Anne-Marie, maybe just picking up on that point. In terms of that idea of collaboration and also that idea of mixed use, creating a place, how much of that is around, there's always been a view for winning cities that it needed to attract, retain human capital, and that actually people were an incredibly important part of achieving that winning city, which also makes that more investable. What's your sense of that in terms of how that works with these innovation districts?
Absolutely key. One of the feedbacks that we've had is that certainly in Glasgow, the graduate retention is pretty high, and a lot of the guys coming out of university now are not wanting to travel, so they are wanting to be able to live and work and not have to commute. So being able to harness the recent graduates and have them come and work in the area is absolutely key to the success of innovation districts. And certainly one of our straplines is live, eat, work, innovate within the area. We're very keen to harness the skills and experience that we've got within Glasgow City Innovation District, and TIC, when it initially opened, was based around energy, health, future cities and manufacturing, and we're now looking to 6 other clusters for the advanced TIC 2 building that we are looking to develop within the site.
Okay, good. I just wanted to pick up a couple of things, but I'll just share the poll results with everybody. Hopefully you can all see those on your screen now. It's 58% think that yes, there will, but not significantly larger. Yes, significantly larger is 35%, and no, it'll stay the same or less is only 7%. So that's quite interesting. Let's just pick this up. Eri, I just wanted to come back to you. When I'm looking at it at the moment, and I'm looking at where capital might be deployed, given the amount of spend that there's got to be by governments in order to support this crisis, then that suggests that there's going to be lower bond yields for a considerable amount of time, which suggests that there's going to be more capital trying to find at least a medium and longer term home in the real estate investment markets. And from my perspective, it makes sense that they'll be looking for secure, long-term tenants in a way. And much of these innovation districts appear to fit that, whether it's academic or whether it's government or whether it's healthcare. What's your sense of that? Do you think there'll be more interest because of the tenant profile?
Yes. No, fully agree with what you just said, and I think it's a good timing as well, because we are at a stage where investors can feel more comfortable and confident in entering this asset type, if you like, be it the type of urban regeneration driven initiative or community built from scratch. And there are various reasons why investors are becoming more comfortable with this. I mean, they used to invest in office, retail, industrial, and that's it. Mixed use was a bit of a scare. Now mixed use is not anymore. On the contrary, it's seen as the type of or the way forward for creating a bit more diversified spaces, more flexible spaces, more resilient spaces going forward. Also, it's a good time because from the occupier perspective, there is the concept of sale and leaseback is maturing as well. So organizations and institutions and companies that in the past maybe would not consider selling their buildings, now they might do that in order to raise capital to invest into research and development, etc. And also the last thing is impact investment. I mean, these kind of investments fulfill this criteria of impact investment, as they have such an positive impact on society, and in most cases they also include environmental aspects too.
That's interesting. Yes, the point about impact investing is good, I think. And also maybe, Anne, coming to you, just in terms of that financing aspect of it, which will be an area that you're familiar with. If there's going to be a restriction, I suppose, also potentially on government finance, maybe city finance, whether there'll be a squeeze on that because of the spending elsewhere because of the health crisis. How will that play out? Do you think you will see more seeking collaboration with private investment, private partners to come in and I suppose manage the real estate to allow a greater focus on that research, R&D aspects? What's your sense of that?
Yeah, I think you will, and I think we'll have to see that. So it's worth remembering that for all of the innovation districts that we're talking about today, each one actually has a group of partners, which includes the university sector, and everyone will have seen in the press the current impact that COVID is having on the university sector. There are partnerships with cities and with government, and we're all seeing the level of borrowing that is happening there. So it's a great opportunity actually for the private sector to think about how they want to support and help shape. And I think that over the recent years, what I've seen is the major funds moving from looking at investment into a single building to looking at investment into districts. And you're seeing that in Manchester, you're seeing that in Oxford, you saw that in Newcastle. Actually, there's a really great example in Newcastle. And if the funds can get themselves to a place where they can make that sort of investment, and through the cities, government and universities, we can create the right partnerships to go out to the market with a real clarity on what we want, then there's huge opportunity. And I think there's an opportunity to move quite quickly on this. And in Scotland, we have a lot of advantage around the city deals where investment is already being made into the infrastructure, which means that one of the key risks for the private sector is being removed to a certain extent. That means that the private sector is taking risk around occupancy. I'm already seeing investment companies from Europe, particularly in the health sector, wanted to come in and partner with us. We have a Strength in Places bid. We actually have 2 Strength in Places bids in at the moment with the funding councils. One of those we have made jointly with a European health investment company. So they are definitely there. They're already buying into Scotland and they're really keen to be part of what we're trying to do. So huge opportunity.
Okay, that's great. What I'm going to do now is we've got a number of questions in that I'll try to deal with, and so this is open for anybody to answer. This one's quite specific, so thank you, Stefano, for that. It's in the context of the emerging national planning framework for NPF4 in Scotland and Scottish Government's consultation. How do you see innovation districts fit within this policy and spatial development plan? could innovation districts be national developments? And that, I think, is quite interesting, both in this context, but also a wider context for the UK and for other countries, whether these become more of a national development in a way. Does anybody want to pick up that specific point?
Richard, I could have a go at that. I mean, we have had, in relation to the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District in Renfrewshire, we have had initial discussions with Scottish Government, who to all intents and purposes have been a partner because of the National Manufacturing Institute Scotland. And we have had conversations about its inclusion within NPF4. So obviously we're not at that stage yet, Richard, but I think to answer Stefano's question, I mean, very much so, we believe that that these kind of districts could easily be national developments in that context.
And just to build on that, I think what is going to be critical for a country the size of Scotland is that we look at as national, local and regional opportunities, whether that's in planning frameworks or everything else. In Glasgow, we have City Centre Innovation District, we have GRID, which is the one that I'm working on, and obviously we then link in with Alasdair. It's really important that we see these as an opportunity for inclusive economic growth across the country. And whilst we may well on occasions be competing for tenants, actually how we sell this internationally has to be a single message and a single vision for the opportunity of Scotland.
Great. Did you want to pick that up, Anna?
I would say I'd absolutely agree with that. I think there is a danger that these innovations that in themselves could become silos if we don't actually work together, and we don't have the luxury of the same investors and the same partners on each of them. But the glue that keeps that together is the likes of Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, and I think that's the role that they need to take, is to make sure that these innovation districts sit together within Scotland, talk to each other, and actually present themselves globally. I think that's the power, rather than in an individual actual site.
There's a question here from Julie Fitzsimmons. Thank you. Great to have you with us, Julie. In the context of inward investment, what's the interest in innovation districts internationally? Maybe that's one either for you, Graham, or for you, Eri, perhaps. How do you see the sort of, in terms of capital looking to come into this, or in an inward investment context? Do you see that being, I suppose, more interesting going forward?
Yeah, interesting speaking with some of my colleagues from around the world, and I think the example of innovation districts, may be called different things in different areas or different cities, but that principle of almost a public sector lead to create the catalyst does very much play to the interest of private sector investment coming in thereafter. So it gives a platform which. There's a story, there's a vision around how that money could be invested around the areas that the private sector are comfortable about taking risk, and that's not typically around the hard physical infrastructure associated with the decontamination. It might be about the roads, it might be about the connectivity to services and the like. So I think if public sector can lead on the vision of what we're trying to achieve, and then the offer becomes quite attractive from an international perspective. And we've seen this, across Europe. A great example my colleague John Batten talks about is the High Line in New York, where effectively, a public sector derelict asset with some stimulus funding then became a real hive of private sector investment and a great place to be and visit.
And that's interesting, because I think that picks up on the point Eri made earlier, also about impact investing, because that whole regeneration aspect it also fits into that profile, which is one that investors are particularly looking at the moment, I think.
I think the long term vision, and as long as they have a long term vision, these districts, they offer this long term. Let's say, sense of income, of security for investors to go in. Many of the characteristics of these districts are the definition of resilience, which investors are looking for at the moment. And it is like they are productive, they are inclusive, they promote sustainable economic development. They offer the characteristics of developing businesses, retaining talent, they're all extremely important ingredients for a long-term commitment.
So we have from Francois, what's the role of innovation leaders or anchor innovating companies to bring success to any innovation district? And as Europe has very few of these compared to the US or China, who have 85% of these, is this a fundamental problem to establish successful innovation districts in Europe? I mean, interesting questions about, I suppose, the types of anchor tenant or anchor companies that help bring success to these areas.
Well, certainly the work that we've done at the BioQuarter, a tenant, an anchor tenant may well be very attractive, but there's no evidence that an anchor tenant actually will bring greater collaboration, because often they can actually be quite siloed themselves, especially if they're in their own building. If they're part of an innovation hub, then yes, absolutely. But if they're a standalone sitting in their own building, really it can be, that in itself does not encourage collaboration. So although I'm sure we're all seeking that, and from a long-term investment and security of income, yes, absolutely great, and it's very good from a brand perspective. But actually, I think I would have to be convinced that that would make a significant difference to collaboration across an innovation site.
We've got another question here from Christoph Ackerman. What changes to the design and operation of urban innovation districts do you see coming out of the current crisis? Can you imagine fundamental changes to the way we work and live? And Christoph accepts that it's a difficult question, but he's still interested in your views, so we deserve to give them to him.
It will make a difference to how we use all of our space. I think that we will be more cautious in terms of things like co-worker space, space where we're sharing, where people are coming together in crowds. I think for some time that will change. What I think we can do is start to learn, though, from across the rest of the world. Obviously, Asia has suffered from SARS for some time, and therefore they've learned how to use space differently in this respect. I think that a lot of the ideas that we had around efficiencies on use of space may no longer exist, but I think what we're going to have to learn to do is blended ways of communication, which will bring together the use of technology far more quickly than we ever expected, together with place. What I think that then means is that the organic way that a lot of placemaking comes together, we create the spaces between the buildings to be attractive, but how much do we then choreograph the way that space is used? I don't think we do very much. I think there's some good examples, places like King's Cross, where they have done that experience master planning. But I think that we will have to think a lot more about choreographing how we use space to get the vibrancy that we need. So developers will have to think differently. The public sector will also have to think differently in terms of how they let us use that space.
That's interesting. I'll pick up that point about technology as well, because thanks Mark Jenkinson for this, also came in with a question about how much of a role has technology played in the development or on operation of your respective sites and around Europe, if we've got that information. So digital twins, prop tech, those kinds of things. Could be a very long answer, but we don't have time for long answers. So just a quick version, if we can, in terms of how much technology has played in your respective developments.
We're just very quickly, Richard. I mean, we're very much at the early stages of ours, but I mean, technology and tech sits right at the heart of what we're trying to do. So effectively, the concept we're developing around will be one of collaboration, but it'll be one around very high tech spaces, with access to the best fiber connectivity and the best use of digital factories, exemplar factories, our skills academy. I mean, the whole thing will be digitized right from the word go, right the way across our Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, our National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland, and indeed the attractor companies, the occupier companies that we aim to get on site as well.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Anne-Marie, Anna?
I was just going to say, from our perspective, one of the things that we were trying to do through the Glasgow City Innovation District was build our community, and we were doing that through focus groups and events. But as a result of the health crisis, we are looking at making better use of technology to try and reach out to the businesses that are within the district. So looking at podcasts and webinars, and we're just about to go live with our first GCID blog. But yeah, technology is very much at the heart of what we're going to be using going forward. And technologies, we are using the current pandemic to reach out in a different way to how we would have done previously.
And we've got another couple of things that I'll just feed in here as well from Dave Brown. Do you anticipate private investors having, or let's say the investment community, having the same interests in generating social value as the public sector facilitators, particularly in light of the economic challenges? And I think that is an interesting one.
I'd like to pick that one up for starters. I think they will, quite frankly. If you look at, for example, the British Property Federation, they have over the last 12 months really pushed forward a campaign to demonstrate how property also has a social value as well as an economic value. And whilst we're dealing with COVID as an immediate crisis, we still will have the issues of climate change. We will have a huge issue that if we try to impose these innovation districts on communities rather than engage communities and ensure that the community gets something from them, then no matter how much we need economic development, we will be moving forward into a position of conflict. So I think that private developers will have to demonstrate social value. It's going to continue to be essential.
Okay, good.
I think it's creating social value through these districts, especially under the circumstances where we are going to see rising unemployment and an economic crisis after the health crisis. These districts are capable of creating the space for new ideas to develop, for new startups. People will have probably the more opportunities to do that now, and then by facilitating and nurturing these, then you create also new employment for the community, and definitely, especially in a period of economic recovery, that will be of a valuable social impact.
Do you think that there'll be different changes in terms of supply lines with less offshoring in a way and moving production closer to home more generally? And if so, do you think that's going to mean that things will move closer to these districts and help create that hub in a way?
If I can pick up that a little bit, so I do, but I think also that's been driven by the sustainability angle as well. But I think when this is over and we look at this in a more forensic way, I think even the ability to procure, a lot of countries have obviously closed their doors and said, for example, key medical equipment can only be used by that country and it can't be shipped to other countries. And I think that's going to open people's eyes up to actually where do a lot of the supply chain come from. Certainly on construction, they come from global. And that's a significant challenge, both sustainably, climate change, but also economically. And I think that the awareness of that will come forward, and I think economically that will be a good thing for the supply chains.
There's another one that picks up some of these areas as well, which is, thanks Morag for this, is how successful do the panel members feel they can achieve inclusivity, diversity, and sharing the benefit of the innovation district with the broader community as a key component of their projects? So I mean, that also in a way picks up some of the things I think about whether or not this current crisis is going to be an accelerator of some of the trends that we've already been seeing, more of a focus on inclusivity, diversity, also as part of that overall ESG side.
We've seen how global industries such as the car manufacturing industry have been very successful in developing local supply chains. In the Midlands, there's a whole ecosystem of suppliers close to the assembly plant. And to my mind, the innovation districts and winning cities, they have that opportunity when they're planning the future, the reimagined future place post COVID-19, to really involve the local schools, the colleges, and the local businesses, small medium enterprise, and give that line of sight towards where growth is going to come from, where opportunities exist, and then allow that local supply chain to build up and deliver to the needs of the innovation district. And I think if we look ahead to construction, construction is not going to be like it was in our belief. We're going to have more social distancing, and that will demand modern methods of construction, more off-site type manufacturing. But that doesn't need to be somewhere remote. That can be in localized factories. Okay,
good. And Alasdair, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, just very, very briefly, Richard. I mean, the idea we've gone for at AMIDS with our advanced manufacturing district is that we've built inclusivity and diversity right in from the start. So we don't have a residential community on the site, and that's because of proximity to the airport runway and such like. But we do have very, very good access and connectivity to not just all communities, but also to some of our poorest communities. We've also built in a skills academy that will come with the NMIS concept. That's going to go on site very, very shortly. And that Skills Academy will aim at foundation apprenticeships and the rest of the parts of the apprenticeship family, working with local colleges to try and get people interested in manufacturing as a career. And quite often these people who wouldn't have considered manufacturing or even going into that sector as a possible career for them.
Okay, good.
If I may add to this, Richard, from Barcelona point of view, with 22 at district, I mean, the role of the local government has been very, very important in driving this, maintaining the inclusiveness, if you like, and driving it by also protecting the area from not becoming gentrified. So protecting, the values of the area, so they remain affordable for the community. The people can still live there, can still afford an apartment there. Also, there has been training with the local community and improvement of their skills to be part of the knowledge economy. So there have been various initiatives to drive this.
Okay, good. Just a couple of questions here to deal with, which is, one of which is, do you think that the increased pressure on public finances will have an impact on the ability for the public sector to properly support innovation district development? Is there a real concern around that? It seems as though this is already dealt with in Scotland, but does anybody have a sense of whether or not there's a concern about the ability of the public sector to support it?
I have a concern about the public sector continuing to support the infrastructure. I mean, certainly a lot of these large and new sites, it's the infrastructure requirements that will unlock the sites. Putting that all onto the developer, it will just become unviable economically. So how do we deal with that? And it's not just on-site. I mean, the on-site infrastructure is one thing, it's the off-site. I mean, particularly in Edinburgh, we have a very difficult transport and road situation with significant investment required to unlock that. And these sites are all great, but not if you can't get to them, or not if it's a torturous journey to get to them. So I think and yes, the city deal has unlocked a lot of sites for that, but for the future, the investment required in off-site infrastructure, both utilities, roads, transport, that is a significant concern, certainly that we're facing at BioQuarter, because these figures are huge. They're hundreds of millions of pounds to unlock that type of infrastructure, and then that speaks to obviously viability and who pays for that.
Last question here also from Stefano again. If innovation districts are potential national developments, what criteria could be used to assess the appropriateness of candidate districts? Competitive advantage, critical mass, convergence, quality of place, connected community. So just briefly, if anybody wants to pick that up in terms of innovation districts, what assessment criteria might be used to assess an area?
You could develop a set of criteria. I think the one thing that it's been referred to already by Anne and others in some of the responses, some of the answers, is that Scotland's a relatively small place. It's a relatively small economy in a European and world scale, and therefore we probably don't want to get the situation where we're ending up setting up criteria that will see lots and lots of innovation districts being set up. I think we do need to stick to the ones that have got the most chance of success. and that have already got the bedrock, if you like, on which to build.
And the last question, which is on from James O'Brien. Thanks, James. So in terms of placemaking, this is a more broad one, but it's around the future of car parks and alternative future uses, given that we're trying to reduce the number of vehicles on the roads. How has anybody dealt with that, I suppose? And that comes down, I guess, to Anna's point as well about connectivity and being able to get there by different routes.
We've tried to build this in from the outset in terms of the concept for AMIDS, Richard, but it's a very, very difficult thing. And then essentially you're talking about winding back in the Scottish context and even in the UK context, 20, 30 plus years. Unlike a lot of our European counterparts, we've had a love affair with the car and its use, and you can see that actually it's much more prevalent actually when you take a walk now in the current crisis, and you see just so many cars parked around streets and businesses and residential areas. In terms of they're just not moving, there's just huge amounts of cars, and we've had this willingness and appetite to use them all the time to access everything. Unless we move away from that ourselves and put investment into public transport in a very large way, such as Anna was referring to there, then we're going to set a real conundrum for ourselves in terms of meeting climate change targets.
Okay, good.
Certainly in the short term, we are continuing to rely on multi-story for the BioQuarter. That's in the short term, while perhaps legislation and the City of Edinburgh start to look at their public transport. But I suppose making the multi-story flexible, what as it diminishes in the future, is there a way that can become something else from a design perspective? Perhaps in 20, 25 years' time, our children will can't believe that most of us drove to work. So therefore, what do we do with that estate moving forward if it is a diminishing infrastructure?
Just in terms of the potential for the sector, both in the UK and also more broadly, I suppose, how do you see this developing? Do you think there will be more of an increased focus, more investor appetite, especially around these innovation and healthcare related real estate, what we in the investment world would call assets?
From an AMIDS perspective, once again, being relatively selfish, if I may, for a second, Richard, I mean, we're certainly hoping that is the case and there is more interest. I mean, at the present time, current crisis accepted, we would have been going out to MIP and launching our approach for a JV partner for the AMIDS site. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody who's going to come in with that long-term commitment for a sustainable relationship over 10 plus, maybe even up to 20 years in terms of developing the site out. So that's the kind of patient investment that we're looking for to partner with the public sector and the public sector agencies on this one. So yes, and from a selfish point of view, I'm certainly hoping that there's going to be continued interest at that level.
Okay, good. Anne?
Yes, but not specifically healthcare. I think the innovation, the need for innovation and to work differently and for people to want to work, live and play in the same area will continue to grow. So I don't think it will change, and I think that investors will see the idea of mixed-use development as something which is actually gives them greater resilience than the old asset classes used to do.
Great. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I agree with Anne. I think the spaces going forward are going to have to be more flexible, and yeah, we will potentially be looking for investors for within GCID. Certainly we're looking for more industry partners to work with us around our clusters of quantum, fintech, health, informatics, 5G and space. Okay,
great. Anna?
Yes, I think the definition of life sciences and the type of businesses and tenants that life sciences sites attract will needs to change. It needs to widen. I think to be quite polarised just on health. We've seen that at BioQuarter by bringing in data innovation with the Usher Institute. The Usher is got a whole array of talent, from statisticians to politicians to policymakers, underpinned by healthcare. But I think the breadth of life sciences needs to widen in the understanding that collaboration and creating a real talent pool of a wide sector of people is how we will actually solve a lot of the global challenges around healthcare. and climate change.
Great, thanks, Graham.
I agree with everything said. I would perhaps just to add, I expect perhaps the that collaboration and the way to encourage the interdiscipline sharing of knowledge probably needs more work, because obviously there's obviously IP kind of concerns around that. But ultimately, I think as we've seen with COVID-19, that sense of collaboration towards a shared purpose can really create pace, and there's a win-win there. So that's important. I think the other thing we kind of touched on in terms of communities, so getting better at how these innovation districts can link to their local environment and actually get the win-win from that as well. So the benefit to the citizen is very much there, as well as for science and the growth of the innovation district.
Great, and last thoughts from you, Eri.
Well, I agree with what has been said so far. I think these districts enhance and support values that have already been important, and they will become more important for especially young people, which is health and well-being. And again, post the crisis and with the economic crisis ahead, education and skills. So I think their importance will be even larger for the community, and I think for that region, and particularly in the context of impact investment, will attract further private investment. So
great. I'll just share the results of a quick poll that I did briefly during that, which was: are we likely to see more investor appetite for innovation in healthcare related real estate? Yes was 71%, no was 10%, and stay the same was 19%. Interesting points there. Certainly from my point of view, it's been great not only to research some of this area, but also hear your views and also hear the views of everybody in the audience there. Thanks very much for sharing your views. Thanks for joining us today. You can register for upcoming events on our website, and also you'll be able to download the presentation. There'll be editorial content based on this, and also video content. I'll send everybody who's an attendee a link to that as soon as it's published, but it'll be on the website from tomorrow. We look forward to running more of these events. The next one, interestingly, that we've picked up on here as well, will focus on ESG, and also because we see that as one of the larger trends, and also healthcare related real estate, which is another key point here, I think, in generating a lot of interest. But for now, thanks very much to everybody for joining us. Thanks very much to the speakers. Stay home, stay safe, stay connected. Thanks very much.